Are we quickly approaching a day where AI robots will be completely indistinguishable from humans, or possibly the ability to upload your consciousness to the cloud? That's what I'm responding to today in this. What do you think? So, for those of you who may not be familiar with me and my content, I'm Christopher Lind. Professionally, I'm a tech analyst, an advisor, and an HR executive. On the personal front, I'm a husband and father of 7 children, ages 12 and under. But ultimately, at the center of that, the red thread that runs through it all is I live my life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. Now, my response today, like many of mine, is not designed to feed into the extremes on either end of this question, but instead present a balanced, down to earth point of view on hopefully helping demystify this question and what goes into it to ultimately help people better understand the intersection of tech and the human experience and where this is all going. But before we get into it, I think it's important to define what we mean when we talk about AI consciousness, because you may hear the term conscious AI or sentience thrown around a lot. And I think it's important to understand that we generally look at AI, or the way I look at it is we have dumb AI, we have smart AI, and we have smarter AI, and then ultimately we get to sentience. And when we see conversations about things like ChatGPT, it's often perceived and presented as this brilliant, very, very advanced artificial intelligence. And in some ways, in many ways, there's brilliance to it. But at the same time, in many ways, it's also very dumb. It's really depending on what you're comparing it to. And so much so, some of the research that's coming out on the latest GPT models from OpenAI is it's actually getting dumber. Its accuracy and its technical proficiency is actually degrading, which highlights there is some instability. There are some cracks in the foundation of even the AI we're seeing today. So this promise that the AI we've created is brilliant and it's sustainable and everything, we've worked out all the kinks, it's not terribly accurate. So we need to be careful and temper our expectations, especially as we hear a lot of the hype and stuff going on. Now, it's also important to describe what we mean when we say human consciousness versus this multifaceted tangle of neural networks. So I very much distinguish there's a big difference between true human consciousness and what can seem like human consciousness, which I would put in the category of smarter AIs, where we start to take some of these intelligent AIs like a Chat GPT and then pair it with another advanced AI that gives it another capability. So ChatGPT is taking language, it's predictively analyzing what you're looking for and then spitting out a response to that, which has lots of different implications, but largely it's very narrow in terms of what it can do. You start pairing that together with things, you start to create these advanced AIs that are a suite of different neural networks, which starts to become smarter. To me, that's still very different from true human consciousness. And what's interesting is, as I've done a lot of research and listened to a lot of folks who are on the cutting edge of this, who are deep into what's going on in artificial intelligence, I would say everyone almost universally agrees the smart, strong AIs, they're an inevitability. So this one that sometimes gets perceived as consciousness or sentience, really, I wouldn't call that sentience, but everybody agrees this multi-tangled neural networks that is a very advanced AI is inevitable. We're going to get to that point. The true sentience is where there's actually a lot of debate, and actually a large number of people I interact with who are far more in the technical side of AI and even neuroscience and all of this, especially in the neuroscience side. They still are on their side of, I don't see sentience ever coming, or if it is so far down the line. Sentience is more of this sci-fi, the science fiction. Robots truly become human. They think and act and behave completely independently of anything. They're capable of taking over the world. This is almost the robot apocalypse that many people think of when they think about true sentience. Now, I think this lack of clarity between strong AI and sentience is actually leading to a lot of the broader confusion that we're seeing among the masses, because you may hear people saying the same things, but they're actually meaning two very different things. You may hear someone who you hold in high regard talking about sentience, and they just mean a really advanced layer of AI. But if you were really to press them on this of, do you actually think AI is going to go all the way to human conscious? They go, oh, well, no, we aren't even close to that. Versus other people are in that camp. So some of this language, and that's why I think it's really important to unpack what we really mean when we start talking about this. So we have some ground rules for how we're thinking about it. So when I'm saying sentient, the question that was at hand is, do we need to be concerned about AI becoming sentient? I'm talking about not just advanced AI. I'm talking about true human consciousness being brought into robots, or transferring our human consciousness to some sort of machine. Now, you may think, if you're light in the conversation or not someone who spends a lot of time around this, who cares? Why is this question even matter? And it actually matters, in my opinion, a lot more than you may realize. Some of the fear that comes from this, and so when I talk to people who are either really concerned about this or just ignoring this possibility altogether, I actually kind of lean into, this is a really good litmus test for your personal identity and where your ego is. I find people who are either wildly overconfident and just completely dismiss the implications of AI, almost going like, sentience, that's ridiculous. AI is never going to replace what humans can do. There's just something similar to the conversation around getting together in person. Some people act like there's something magical about getting together in person. There's this attitude of, well, there's just something magical about humans. It's just never going to do things that humans can do. Almost an overconfidence in AI's ability. On the flip side, there's the underconfidence of, oh my gosh, we need to be terrified. We need to be afraid AI is going to take over the world. All of these things completely disregarding the unique human qualities that we have, and really how complex, which is where we're going to get into some of these things. And so I think this can be really helpful, because how you react to the question, do I need to be concerned about AI consciousness, or even the conversation of consciousness, is potentially a good litmus test for you. And where are you in terms of your overall stability and resilience to things? Because the same is true of, you can use this as a litmus test to see, where are you on your ability and willingness to adapt and change? Because the reality is, if you've listened to any of the content that I create, where AI is going to change the world as we know it. And it is going to fundamentally disrupt and change a lot. And that can be a really good thing. It can be a really bad thing. And I think we're going to experience both. But depending on your attitude towards this idea of what I would consider the furthest off extreme of where AI is going, it can be a bit of a litmus test into, where are you at overall? And that's where I'd encourage people to lean into that. If the idea of AI consciousness has you completely wigging out, it's a good opportunity to do some self-reflection and look at that and go, well, what is it that is giving me that lack of confidence, this fear of what's to come? On the flip side, if you just completely are dismissing not necessarily just consciousness, but where AI is going, who cares about this? It's never going to do anything that's going to directly impact me, because I'm just so uniquely amazing and gifted. You're ripe for getting curb stomped at some point. I think of a time not that long ago, several years ago, where I was talking to a team of instructional designers and sharing with them that AI I was seeing 4 or 5 years ago was capable of designing better learning content than they were. And that was met with a lot of different reactions. Some people met it with complete hostility and resistance. There's no way. Some people met it with complete panic. The end of the world is coming. And some met it in the middle of, okay, so what are we going to, where can I adapt or evolve to make sure that obviously some component is being disrupted? So how do we lean into it? And I'd like to see more people move away from the extreme ends of that towards the middle and recognizing what's happening. So let's talk about this whole thing. My take on, will machines truly become human? My previously defined version of what I mean when I say sentient AI or human consciousness? Will we create AI with a true conscious feelings, thoughts, all these other things? I will just out of the gate say, for me, with my worldview, which if you've seen other content, you know I'm coming from a biblical worldview. To me, this is just an easy answer of no. The quick hit for me, and trust me, there's more to it. So don't just turn off the video right there and go, oh, well, I guess that's his answer. That's where we stop. But for me, from a worldview, I look at what scripture says about what it means to be human, and human is an identity assigned to human beings by God. The Imago Dei, we are created in his image. It is not, has nothing to do with our performance, what we do, our capabilities. And I think this is where sometimes you'll see a lot of this. Well, humans are uniquely human because they're creative, and then AI does things that are creative when we freak out, or humans only can interact with people, and then we have natural language processing that creates semi-human interactions. We go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Where for me, I look at it and go, it's not about what we do. Somebody who's in a vegetative state on a hospital bed is uniquely assigned the attribute of human made in the Imago Dei, regardless of what they do, regardless of what they're capable of. And so for me, it just dismisses the whole idea of, well, can AI become, well, no, because it was assigned to humans. It's not assigned to machines. So it can't truly ever have that. Now, I don't want to spend a whole ton of time digging into this because it, to me, simply saying the Bible says is lazy. It just, first of all, it only resonates with a certain perspective of the audience. And it's lazy because you actually have to dig into this. And quite frankly, I think there are so many other non-theological, philosophical aspects that actually would validate my point of view. So to me, what we see in natural law simply validates what I believe to be true from a biblical standpoint versus, well, the biblical standpoint. So now therefore I'm going to force this on. And that's just how I'm coming at this. So I would rather spend more time on some of these other things so that people who may not share my worldview can say, okay, well, maybe I don't share your worldview. So then how do you look at it? So let's take my worldview aside. And let's say I were to just approach this from a non-biblical worldview. Even natural law, on my opinion, demonstrates I see no evidence of AI truly reaching consciousness or sentience. And some of it is just from, let's take really intelligent animals. We continue seeing animals learn new things, and you don't hear people worrying that they'll become people. We don't worry about, oh my gosh, did you hear this? So I just watched a video with my kids the other day about this guy who's trained elephants to be in a band, and they have a band and they play music, and it's fascinating, but you don't hear people going, what's next? Is the pack of elephants going to take, are they going to learn to speak? And so we inherently know that about these other things, yet AI is in some ways taking what we've often assumed about ourselves, which is truly unique, and going, I can do that too. And because we don't necessarily have this strong foundation of, well, wait, what actually does make us distinctly human? It's shaking things up. But at the same time, I look at the way animals do things. I look at other things that we go, well, we've taught, machines to do other things. We don't necessarily worry, are they going to become human? While granted, it's moving at a much faster pace and some of the complexity of what it can do continues to go up. A machine is not, my opinion, is not going to become human. It can't. It's a machine. It can't become human. It is just not a line that it can cross, just like other things aren't just going to cross a line because somehow it demonstrates an ability that we didn't think it was capable of demonstrating before. And we've seen this in other examples, maybe not to this level, but I think the same kind of principle, I would apply the same kind of principle over and say, yeah, for that reason, I just don't see us reaching that point. Something else, though, that I see very frequently is we often vastly underestimate the absolute beauty and wonder of human beings and the human mind. We think that AI right now is brilliant because it can, in seconds, cobble together a story based on a simple prompt. And there's brilliance behind that, very much so. But At the same time, it's still very dumb and makes a lot of mistakes, and it's very narrow in terms of what it does. And I think we often take for granted how complex some of the very basic things that we do are and how much work. And largely it's because many of us are on the consumer side of artificial intelligence. And so what we're seeing on the consumer side is simply the absolute completion of all this time and energy and resources when it poured into getting something to do something as basic as select a cat from a list, something that a child can pick up like that. It takes millions and trillions of gigabytes of data and all this stuff to get it to figure some of this stuff out. And it's still wrong quite a bit versus a little kid can very quickly. I have a lot of them. I can tell you, they can pretty quickly figure out, yeah, that's a cat. And we take for granted how much that really takes and how complex our minds are and what they do on a daily, minute by minute, hour by hour basis. I was watching some videos recently on human mind mapping. I do this is the kind of stuff I do with my kids, by the way, and they love it. And we were digging into some of the science that neuroscientists have done, trying to delve into the complexity of the brain and what we do and how complex it is. And they had tried to do a scan of a mouse brain. And really, all they had done is taken one sand size piece of brain tissue from a mouse and sliced it into all of these things, which, by the way, is a technological innovation in and of itself. The fact we can even do that, and you'll see we don't even do that super well. But all of this took massive amounts of data to be able to scan this one teeny tiny little chunk of mouse brain matter. And even that scan still only showed the blueprint of what it looks like non-functioning. It still didn't tell us anything about how information traveled through it, how decisions were made, where things went. And all of this took up massive space. And in the video, it talked about the fact if we were to take one human brain, and try and unpack that and simply do the scan. I'm not talking about the engineering of how everything works, but simply scan down on a cellular level how the human brain is structured. It would take more than all of the storage in the world simply to scan it. So our brain scanning technology alone would require more resources than we have in the world today. And that's simply for one human brain. And we still wouldn't know how it works. We would still only have a blueprint of its overall structure. No idea. There's not even like directional lines showing, there's not a mind map of how information, a decision tree of how information travels through it. It would still simply be a scan of, okay, now we've consumed all of the data from everywhere, and we now have one human brain. To me, that is absolutely mind-blowing on the complexity of it. And so, yes, when we look at what AI is doing, we go, wow, that's really impressive. It's really advanced comparatively to what we've often seen. And yeah, in some ways, is it able to pick up patterns? Is it able to predict things in ways that are unique and different and faster than some people can imagine? Absolutely. And I don't want to deny or downplay the absolute beauty and wonder of what AI can do. But when you start to look at it on scale with the human brain and you go, well, okay, now we're comparing this to that. And suddenly, when you actually look at the whole scale of it, it's a different story. And to me, that's just another natural indicator of, okay, we really don't know all that much about how the human mind works. To say, oh, yeah, we created it in a machine. How can we even say that? We don't even really understand how the human mind works. We understand a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent about it. And yet we're going to propose that we can create a machine that can do everything. To me, it's just silly. It's silly. Okay. The other piece is the sheer processing power and stability of these massive AI models. And this again goes back to, if you're on the consumer end and your only experience with AI is going to Chat GPT and typing in something and seeing the magic happen in front of your eyes and going, wow, I asked it to tell me a story about this, and all I gave it was these details. And it shot out a whole novel faster than I could even come up with those ideas. It can create, again, and it's impressive. Don't want to deny the impressivity of that. At the same time, most people have very little understanding of what went into making that, and the sheer volume of data and the sheer volume of human resources going in and looking at the models and saying, oh, nope, that's not right, and weeding through all the wrong decisions and all the other things. And we still have a relatively dumb AI. The number of examples, even in my own perspective, that I've experienced with Chat GPT, even the 4 and some later models that are still in experimentation mode, they're making colossal mistakes that people just don't make. And so when we think about that, you start looking at it and you go, oh, okay. Suddenly on scale, the idea of AI competing with true human consciousness in its broad diversity suddenly seems far less threatening. It takes a lot of power and time and resources to build them. And that's just getting it off the ground. Then in terms of maintain, we still largely don't have a lot of insight into the sustainability and maintainability of these models. And you look at 3.5 and its data came from 2021. We're coming into 2024. And I know there's a lot more access and it's changed a lot, but largely even these models are struggling to keep up with things with any degree of accuracy. And it's largely still very much unknown. So even some of the things and the promises that are being made, kind of talking about, hey, look how amazing these things are. It's like, well, we haven't really had time to test this. And the tests that we are seeing, I certainly wouldn't hand over my keys to an AI model anytime soon. And are we even going to be able to sustainably manage that? So you think about that and what we're doing today. Now to take that to a degree of human consciousness and the sheer complexity of what we can do, to me, it's just no. We're no, just no. The last one is commercial viability. So if I made the case from commercial viability, pursuing sentience, I believe, is largely going to remain a hobbyist activity. The amount, going back to the time and resources and things that go into this, the amount of resources that go into building a really stable, trusted AI model that can do one thing really well, or even a couple things really well, to pour the kind of time and resources and energy into a model that then can do that for all things, it's just not commercially viable for a company to. Let me use a common example. Okay, I often, because I delve so much into the tech space, if you look at products, frequently products that do everything tend to not do anything terribly well. They're mediocre at best. Versus products that specialize in a specific area, they can actually be extraordinary at what they do. And the same is going to hold true for AI. Yeah, maybe there will be general mediocre multi-neural networks, smart AIs that are kind of okay at things, but the level of specialty that you would need to go into for them to be as specialized as what a human can pick up very quick, it's just not commercially viable. And at the end of the day, commercial viability is going to be one of the largest drivers in where investment dollars and development in AI goes. So if something's not commercially viable, and we see this all the time with things. I spent a good chunk of time in pharmaceuticals, and one of the unfortunate parts of the pharmaceutical industry is diseases that are extremely rare aren't terribly commercially viable. So the amount of dollars, resources, and innovation spent on curing or addressing those diseases just isn't there. And granted, governments do things to try and supplement that, but they do it because, hey, we're trying to fix and cure diseases and heal humans. Somebody going like a government grant to try and encourage companies to create sentient AI when there's really little to no commercial viability for it To me, I just don't see it going that way. I just really see very limited use cases where someone can say, oh, true sentient AI, and all the time and resources when you really understand what would go into doing that, that someone's going to go, thumbs up there. I think that is absolutely where we want to pour billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. No. So I think it's largely going to be something that hobbyists, enthusiasts may pursue, kind of one of those things that people play with on the fringes. But do I see it ever becoming this massive commercially viable, robots that can literally do absolutely everything? No. Now, if you've seen other content that I have, one of the ones I just recently produced, I did talk about, responded to Mustafa's comments about robots in the next 20 to 30 years. And I largely agree with him that I think we're going to see commercially viable robots come into the market in the next few decades. We've got a ways to go on that. And I agree with that statement. But I think when you look at that, even that, like, what really will they be able to do? And will they, are we going to invest commercially to make them truly sentient? When you really think about how flexible and adaptable human beings are, to make a robot that you go, well, we can just kind of put it anywhere and it'll figure it out. It's not, we have people that do that. To invest in the commercial viability, I just, again, continue to struggle. Feel free to disagree in the comments if you want. Share your thoughts and perspectives. But for me, this is one, just practically speaking, and as a business leader, that I go, yeah, I think that's going to be a big barrier for people to overcome. And I know some folks who are really big hobbyists in this space, and they are pursuing what they believe to be sentient AI. And I think they will largely stay in that hobbyist enthusiast space. But all these other reasons, to me, go above and beyond. To me, this is the evidence revealing what I already believe to be true from my worldview, that you just can't, you can't make a robot a human. You can't. Okay. That said, and here's where I think the risks come into play. And I think this is why, not I think, this is why I spend so much time and energy creating content around this and having conversations about it, is machines are going to mirror a lot of human activity. And it already is, and we're only going to see more of that. And I say that because this goes back to this, why should you care about this, is the fact that if you think it's not going to, if you think there's something you do that is so uniquely you that a robot will never be able to do it, that puts you at risk, not only for your identity, but the reality is complacency. You're either dying or you're growing. And that's just life. I mean, ultimately, we're all dying, but that's ultimately when it comes to skills and things like that. You're either growing or you're dying. And so being complacent in general makes you ripe for disruption without AI. Take AI out of the equation, but AI now is going to accelerate a lot of this stuff. And so when I see the fact that AI is going to mirror a lot of human activity, we're already seeing this with some of the dumb or smart-ish AI models. We're seeing this today where it's impressive. It can write, it can take something, and I use it, just to give an example, I use it to take some of my long form content and help restructure it and reform it into ways that it's still taking my stuff, but repackaging it or giving me things to repurpose it for, that I then layer in and edit and mess with. But again, is it doing a lot of that stuff that normally I would have an editor or a person doing copyright for me that would do? So yeah, it will. And it's going to mirror more and more of those things. And some of the things that today we go, AI will never do this, it will be able to do that. And that's a good thing. It needs to. So some people hear that and they get concerned and they go, I'm afraid of what that means. And I would actually, if that's you, if I'm speaking to you in this camp where you're going, that concerns me that it's doing more human activity and that might mean disruption for me, I would just speak to you and say, that's actually a really good thing. Because the reality is, I don't know that I've ever encountered anyone in my life who truly is achieving everything that they would want to. They don't have the time or the capacity or the resources. So even on an individual level, I don't know anyone who's nailing it in every area that they'd like to. And so AI getting smarter and being able to do some of those things is fantastic. It's going to add to your capacity and your ability to do more meaningful, really important work. And that's great. And then you take that on a macro level. We've got a lot of macro problems that we are reaching human capacity to solve. I look at diseases we've been working on forever. I look at the state of our environment. I look at a lot of different things and go, the pace at which we can innovate versus the pace at which we need to innovate, we're losing ground. And to me, AI is very much a positive accelerant. It's a bit of NOS in the tank to really boost us forward. And so while you can approach this from a scarcity mindset and go, what is it going to take away from me? You could also flip that on its head and say, hey, you know what? This could actually really add a lot to me and what I'm able to do. And the reality is, my observation has been, in the conversations I've listened to and been part of, the data continues to demonstrate that AIs plus human, AIs, like they're a thing. You get what I mean. AI plus humans consistently delivers better performance, consistently. Even the best AI models perform better when they have a human in the loop helping them and seeing things differently. And humans get better when they're in the loop because it pushes them to think beyond their capacity, that before they had a cap, AI suddenly lifts the ceiling and they're able to operate at a different threshold. And it's a good thing. And so its ability to do more, mirror some of the human activity, contribute to some of those things that before there just wasn't any other way around it, it will be able to help us. And I think there's a real positive spin to that. Now, obviously, if you've listened to anything that I talk about, there is a absolute potential for things not to go well. And we need to lean into that reality as well and be keenly aware of it and be considering it and be prepared for how will we proactively address that and what will we do about it. We can't ignore it and go, oh, so it's all sunshine and puppies and rain. No, it's not. And I think inevitably we are going to experience the best and the worst of AI. I don't think it's one or the other. I think we're going to experience both. The other thing, though, I think we need to be really careful about machines beginning to mirror more and more of human activity is we are going to run into this point where if we aren't grounded in what it means to be human and our identity, it is going to start making promises it can't keep. And that's dangerous for us, on an individual level and a macro level. And AI idolatry and just thinking it's going to solve things that it can't. It's going to be things that it shouldn't, that it's going to do things that it has no business doing. That is very dangerous territory. And the reality is, people who don't recognize that AI in many ways will begin to mirror a lot of human activity and more human activity over time. If you don't think it will, you're more vulnerable to being duped by it. And I think that's the part that we need to be really cautious about when it comes to AI mirroring more and more human activity. Does it mean it's going to be sentient? I don't believe so, just theologically and even just from a practical natural law standpoint. I don't think, to me, that's in any way, shape, or form a concern of mine. I'm more concerned about its ability to mirror us and people not believing it can mirror us, because it's when you believe something can't happen that you can ultimately be fooled by it. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be cautious of. So in conclusion on this one, is AI going to become truly sentient? My conclusion on that is no, not at all. But realistically, to me, I think we have a better opportunity. Rather than debating and arguing over whether AI can be sentient, we should be more focused on concerning ourselves with tackling what dumb and smart AI are doing right now and will be doing in the next few years. I think that's a much larger concern for us than whether or not you're going to be able to live for eternity in a computer. And honestly, I'm not even going to go down that path, because I'll draw that hypothetical out. And even that, to me, is a horrible existence. So why would you even want to explore the possibility of that? But the bottom line is, it's easy to focus our attention. We have a really bad habit of this as people, is We don't want to think about the world we're in right now, the bathwater we're soaking in. And it's easier to think about what's out there, what's over there, what am I not having to address because it's right in front of me. And that's something I think we need to be more concerned about is, hey, what are the things in our immediate future that are inside of our control versus what are the things 80 miles down the road that really evidence today shows there's no chance of it anyway, regardless of your worldview. And you have no control over it anyway. So why pour all your time and attention into that? We have more than enough to deal with. So for those of you watching and listening who made it this far, I would encourage you to focus your attention on that. Identify those areas in your life, identify those vulnerabilities, and close the gaps. It's okay to reflect and consider some of these things. I'd encourage people to do it all the time. I know I do, but don't get lost in it. Because ultimately, growing up in a funeral home, I can tell you right now, I am all too aware of the harsh reality that there are way too many people who spend their whole lives worrying about things out there that are out of their control, only to find out they didn't wake up the next day anyway. So, with that, I hope you found this helpful. Love your feedback, and I will continue creating more content helping you as we live life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. Have a great one.